I'm going to do a little microphone test. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
In the back? And no feedback? All right, welcome. I'm so glad to see everyone here in person tonight at the Tracy Aviary. My name is Christina Robb, and I'm the chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization. We go by ELCO. We have several board members in our room from the 4 District 5 community councils. And we like to get together and to collaborate on these bigger forums, debates, etc. Because we feel like, especially at the state level, that our swath of territory is a very important area, because we go all the way from 1300 East Liberty, all the way down to the freeway at Ballpark. So I want to first thank the candidates for being here. We know your time is valuable and we really appreciate it. Right off the bat, I'm going to let you know this is a very informal forum. We got a lot of questions from our constituents as to how we can make politics more approachable for everyone. So we wanted just to invite them here and let them tell you about themselves. Okay, so the way we're going to start out tonight is that each candidate will have 8 minutes, up to 8 minutes, to tell you whatever they want you to know about themselves. On this side, we have our candidates from just House District 23. And on this side, we have our candidates from House District 24. After you've heard from all 5 candidates, then the community councils got together and decided on a few questions that spoke to District 5 in general. I want to reach out to Ballpark, Central 9, Liberty Wells, and thank you all so much for being part of this collaboration with us. Can we have a round? I also want to thank the Tracy Aviary for hosting us. They had a paid rental that came up at the last moment, so they let us use these facilities for free, our community councils, and we really appreciate that. So we, at the last moment, moved to this room, set up some sound, and we're going to make it work. So thank you for being patient with us. And I will now defer to our first candidate in alphabetical order from District 23 for our 8 minutes. Are you ready? Alphabetical order. You go. I was like, introduce yourself. Okay. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for organizing this and how much it takes behind the scenes. My name is Jeff Howell. I'm running to be the representative in House District 23, so that's kind of East Salt Lake City area. And the current representative is Brian King, who's going to be our next governor. Let's give it up for Brian King. And Brian King has endorsed our campaign. I believe that there's a reason why he has endorsed our campaign. I believe that experience and effective leadership matter. I believe it's time for a new generation of leaders who listen, who are honest, who can solve problems and deliver results. Another reason why I'm running is that I am sick and tired of the contention and of the extremism on Capitol Hill. I want a vote for Jeff Howell is a vote for more civility, more decency, and for effective leadership. So I wanted to share a little bit about my background and experience and why I'm running. So when I was 2 years old, my father, Scott Howell, decided to run for the state senate. This was in the early 90s. And he would literally push me in a stroller going door to door talking to voters. And my father, Scott, became the Senate minority leader. And at a young age, I learned the importance of listening and service and leadership, and what leadership is truly about. And I believe leadership is about service. And one of the major pieces of legislation that my father passed was providing full-day kindergarten for students in Utah. Education is my number one issue. If you were to ask on the campaign trail, I'm constantly asked, what's your number one issue? And I emphatically respond with education. And specifically what I want to get past on the Hill is that the Salt Lake City School District has a strategic initiative that by 2029, they want to have 80% of K-3 students reading at grade level. If I were to get elected, I would want to leave a legacy that we leave no child behind because they are our future. And I actually struggled to read when I was in elementary school. I also had a stutter, so President Biden and I share at least one attribute with each other. And my teacher, Mrs. Reevy, would spend time with me after school helping to improve my reading skills. So this is an issue that I care deeply about. And I work in the tech industry, and I have seen the data and research that if we can get our kids to read at grade level, it has a profound impact on their life. We have more kids graduating from high school, more kids going to college, and more contributing members of society. The other issues that I care deeply about are our environment, housing affordability, and homelessness. Before I go into that, I want to share just a little bit about my background. So when I was young, I was involved in campaigns, and in college, I worked in the Salt Lake City mayor's office under Ralph Becker. I got a good understanding of how our city operates. After that experience, I moved to Washington, D.C. during the Obama administration, and I worked on Capitol Hill for 2 different members of the United States House of Representatives. I got a good understanding of our legislative process and how effective policy is made. After that experience, I moved back to Utah with my wife and 3 kids. We live across the street from Bonneville Elementary School. And I've been a very engaged member of our community, not just since the day I announced my candidacy for this race. I serve on the board of directors of the In Between, which is a hospice center for the homeless. I've been in the trenches. I understand this issue of homelessness. I've also served on the board of directors of the Utah Emerging Leaders Initiative. This is an organization where we help millennials and Gen Zs get more civically engaged. Utah is the youngest state in the nation when you look at ages 18 to 35. So I believe that our voices need to be heard, and I want to amplify those voices. I'm also a member of Silicon Slopes. As I said, I work for a large tech company. And also, I think most importantly that I'm proud of is that every Wednesday at 12:30, I volunteer at Bonneville Elementary School, helping 3rd graders to improve their reading skills. So I've been an engaged member of this community, and I care deeply about this community. I mentioned that education is my number one issue. The environment is probably my number 2nd issue, particularly air quality and the Great Salt Lake. So on day 1 of the legislative session, I would join the Great Salt Lake Caucus, and I would do everything I can to get more water into the Great Salt Lake. I think one of the ways we do that is we need to compensate farmers for water that they're not using. We pour more water into the Great Salt Lake. And we've actually been endorsed by O2, which is one of Utah's leading environmental agencies. I met with them, and I want to amplify their efforts on Capitol Hill. One of their initiatives is they have an initiative called Prosperity 2030. And that by 2030, they want to reduce emissions by 50%. And this is our organization that's not just rallying on Capitol Hill, but they're actually lobbying. They're actually in committee hearings trying to improve our environment. Other issues I care about is homelessness and housing affordability. I'm sure we're going to have questions about that, so happy to go into detail with that. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm running. As I mentioned, I believe it's time for a new generation of leaders who listen, who are honest, who can solve problems and deliver results. And I've also worked in the tech industry for the past 10 years, and I really thrive working in an environment that challenges and disrupts the status quo. And if there's any time in our political history that needs disruption, I believe it's now. And I believe I have the skill set, experience, and backgrounds to be an effective leader, to carry on Brian King's legacy, my dad's legacy, and legacies of so many others in this state. So I would love your vote. And lastly, I want to be very accessible to the community. I will be the most accessible legislator that you have ever met. When I'm knocking doors and I'm sending emails out and text messages, I provide my personal cell phone number. If you want it, come ask me for it. And I tell people, if you reach out to me and I don't respond, then don't vote for me. That's how passionate I am about this. My number is 801-441-8363. So please feel free to reach out to me. I want to amplify your voice and your efforts. So please vote for me. I would love to have your vote. Again, my name is Jeff Howell, running for House District 23, and we have the endorsement of Brian King, our future governor. Thank you.
I'll make sure I don't. My name is Cabot. I am running with the United Utah Party for House District 23. I've run for office many times over many years. I don't pose a threat to anyone. I do admit that chances are somewhat slim, so that gives me a great deal of latitude to express my mind, express my opinions. Everybody's entitled to my opinion, I guess. I think the number one issue for me, and the reason why I do run under a third party, is because I desperately need, we all do, electoral reform to break the two-party system. So tonight, I'm not asking you to do something like, oh, be fair, be reasonable. No, I'm asking you to do something unreasonable and go ahead and cast your vote for a third party. It's not going to hurt. And I'm not an extremist. I'm not cracked pottery, nothing like that. I have spent quite a bit of time in civic concerns. I've spent 10 years on the Sugar House Committee. But it's good to see you, Judy, here. I spent time there, including one term as chair, a couple of vice chairs and others. And a lot of my policy ideas imitate similar to what the Democrats would offer. I'm very concerned about education. I'm okay with some vouchers, but they're for schools, but I was not happy with the way that the voucher system basically shoveled a bunch of money to organizations that might very well be beyond the scrutiny of how our public monies are being funded. I hate that idea. I certainly do. You're going to end up with a grand swindle there. For environments, I'm concerned about the Great Salt Lake as well. I think for the water rights issues, frankly, I don't think our Constitution in Utah allows us to tax water rights, but I think that's something that we ought to do, and then use the money garnered from that tax to buy out others who are not using the water rights, or in fact, allowing farmers, if they're going to let the water go free, that they still maintain that ownership. So these are some ideas to encourage letting some of the water go back to the Great Salt Lake. You're never going to be able to get the farmers on board if they're just going to voluntarily give it up. It's just not going to work that way. I can come up with other ideas too, but I think the main thing I want to emphasize is how feckless any of these ideas will be, as long as we get stuck with the same two parties. Notice that the Republican candidates are not here tonight. They're not here to defend themselves, largely because they know that they're pretty much pointless in this district. And I'll admit that this race is probably going to be solved out of the Democrats' primaries. That's just the way it works. But see, that's the problem with the calcification we have when we have a two-party system that is stuck. It is obnoxious. And of course, the Republicans are not here to defend themselves. So if I just simply say that Donald Trump is a slime ball in a sea of pus. He is one of the worst people we have ever faced running for public office in this nation, especially president. He is mendacious. He's a hypocrite. He is, frankly, stands about the biggest threat to our democracy that we have. But again, what's the point in doing it at this level here when I say that we're still starting with a two-party system? You don't start with third parties at the presidential level. No, it has to be done at the state level. So to get specific on the electoral reform, I would ask that the legislature continue forward with the little progress they've been making on things such as ranked choice voting, but only used for municipalities. Start using the ranked choice voting for partisan elections. If they don't want that, there are other forms out there too, such as the Congress say, the approval voting. A variety of different ballot formats can be used for allowing people to choose a third party without throwing their vote away. And that's something that I'm advocating for. And with kindest regards to Scott Howell, he voted against keeping fusion candidacies. He voted against having fusion candidacies. What sense does that make? They're just there. These two parties are there to solidify their own power. It's horrible. I've had plenty of criticism for the Democrats too. It seems like the Democrats have been blinded with the fact that their party is also collapsing. That people of color are moving towards the Republicans. They're losing some support from women, even though there is the issues about abortion that's very salient now. The Democrats are not in a good position for long-term growth with the way that they're going. National identity means something. And and a lot of people are getting tired of some politicians who acted being gay is a major life accomplishment. These are cultural issues that do resonate with people, like it or not. You don't choose the battleground with some of these political struggles that we have. I don't need to keep carrying on and on. But like I said, the one thing I can leave with you is do something unreasonable tonight. Vote for a third party, vote for Cabot Nelson District 34, District, excuse me, 23. Thank you very much.
We worked this out before because I was not going to be able to clear that height. So we made sure that I knew where I was going to stand here so you can all see me tonight. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hoang Nguyen. By show of hands, how many of you live in House District 23? Oh, good. There's a good number in here because I know the community council covers a small sliver of House District 23. These lovely ladies here who run these community councils, I was the former chair of Midtown Business District, which was downtown, that represented over 500 different businesses downtown. And I worked in collaboration a lot with Amy, and I have spoken with Christina before to talk about the different ways that we can drive more of the economic engine downtown. But however, with community councils, I wanted to just introduce myself tonight, talk about why I'm running. My name is Hoang Nguyen. I'm running to be our next House representative in District 23. A place that I have called home for the last 25 years. A place that my husband and I have chosen to raise our two boys. I grew up here in Utah. I went to Riley Elementary, Bryant Junior High, and East High before going on and earning my degree in Women's Studies from the University of Utah. But before I called Utah home, my family and I escaped from Vietnam as political refugees after the war. Shortly after we arrived in the US, my father was killed during an armed robbery coming home from work one night. This left my mom, a 35-year-old widow with 7 children from the ages of 3 to 15. Life was rough. We had to quickly adapt and navigate in order to survive in this new country where we didn't speak the language. My mom worked multiple jobs while my oldest sister stayed home and raised us. We watched and learned firsthand what sacrifice and hard work meant. Years later, when my siblings decided to start our family business, we wanted to take those same values of hard work and taking care of one another into our family business. This led to the creation of jobs for thousands of Utahns. We had been voted the best company to work for by our employees time and time again. One of the greatest privileges that I've had in my life is watching the people who have come through our company grow and thrive. 5 years ago, I started going up to the Hill to advocate for more equity and more common sense policies. After a while, I started to notice a few glaring issues. First, there are not enough women up on the Hill. Women do not have fair and equal representation. Women make up 49% of the state of Utah, and yet we only have 25% of the seats on our Hill. Data shows that when women are elected, we tend to put forth policies that are more inclusive and family-oriented. Secondly, we are not doing enough to safeguard our future and our environment here. From the air that we breathe to the lack of water that we so vitally need. Like many of you, I worry about the future, or what it looks like for our kids here. We need to address our environmental issues now and not keep pushing it down the road year after year. As a Utahn who deeply believes in loving and accepting my neighbors, this last legislative session was personally really difficult for me. From the DEI rollbacks to the attacks on transgender youths and the ongoing destabilization of our public education system. I fear that we are moving further and further away from the ideals of community and care that has always made our community, our state, so great. When I turned 18 and became a naturalized citizen, I chose to be a Democrat. I chose the party that believes in giving every human being a fair and equal chance. I made sure I voted every single time I had the chance to. Even though we weren't raised to follow politics, we were just there to try to survive and take care of one another, I knew it was important. By supporting someone like me, you are sending someone who has experienced the different gaps in our society. From the lack of equity in education to the lack of access to quality healthcare. I know where the holes are in our society, and I want to help close them. My different lived experiences are unique and offers a fresh perspective to help get us through these challenging political times. I love Utah. I really love Utah. I deeply believe in this country and the home that has offered my family refuge and the opportunity to grow and to thrive the way we have. People that come from my background rarely ever have the opportunity to run for office. By electing me, this district will take part in making Utah history by electing the first refugee and the first Vietnamese American ever to the state office. By electing me, this district will send a message to all of Utah and the rest of the nation that we want more diverse voices representing all Utahns. This message is enthusiastically echoed by our own elected officials who have gone on to endorse me, who have worked with me for years, from our mayor, Aaron Mendenhall, to our county mayor, Jenny Wilson, to our state Senate Democratic leader, Luz Escamilla. They know my values. They know my work ethic. They know how hard I've worked to give back and contribute back to this community that has offered me this home. I hope I can earn your support because as your representative, I will work hard every single day, fighting for our families, our democratic values, and giving every human being a fair and equal chance. Thank you so much, everyone.
You want. She doesn't.
You know, we signed up for this. You didn't necessarily sign up to come to this event. You could be home gardening. I appreciate you being here. My mother passed away in October, and I've been thinking about my mom and dad lately. My dad was homeless during the Great Depression. His father lost a business. They lost their farm, and for a few years, the family lived in a boxcar. They did eventually find a farm. Dad was 9 of 10 children. He made it through college on an ROTC scholarship, and after he did his Air Force duties, decided he wanted to be a teacher. He didn't want to be full-time military. The GI Bill got him through his master's degree and his EDD. And every day I'm in the legislature and every committee I sit in, I know that government programs well designed help people. And I have to bring that because I listen to so much crap about how government doesn't help and how it hurts, while they systematically disinvest in the programs that could help most people. I was a school teacher when I ran. I consider myself a school teacher, though retired. Sometimes I think I should jump back in. I didn't think the legislature was doing right by public education. I don't think they're doing right by public education today. They're systematically dismantling it. We paid a lot of attention to vouchers, which we should. We paid a lot of attention to other issues, but they slipped 2 or 3 other issues by. They're putting together a program to get people to take their kids out of public schools that are paying to do so. There is a program in Salt Lake City that doesn't have enough attention in the school district. It keeps 70% of their teachers 5 years after they start. The average in Utah is 50%. I haven't updated those figures since COVID. Is it still Chase? Is it still about 50%? Salt Lake City does a better job. I'm amazed that 50% stay in public education. My sister's retiring this year. I am stunned that 50% of the teachers stay at least 5 years. You would think that they were doing what they're doing to try and get us to leave. The RAND Corporation does an annual random sample survey of teachers, and 2 months ago, they said 60% of the teachers in the United States of America have stopped talking about things they're afraid are going to get them in trouble, whether or not there are any laws in their state saying they shouldn't do it, because they're just afraid. And I told Representative Stenquist, you may not be trying to do this on purpose, you're scaring teachers. I don't want teachers in classrooms who are afraid to talk to kids about the things that kids want to talk about. That is not a recipe for success, and that is not a recipe for democracy. I did sign on to legislation, House Bill 505, it's 505. They took out protections for gender in public schools, and they took out the requirement that charter schools and school districts should be required to give training to teachers about equity, justice, et cetera. I ran legislation to put those back in. I'm not holding my breath that they're going to pass it. So what I do in public education, I think it's time now that we've got 80 to 90% of people ride tracks more. 2 years ago, I ran legislation to say zero fare, 365, 24/7, all day, all year long. What I heard was the Senate Republicans were okay with it, the House Republicans were not. So this year, I'm doing something that Salt Lake City's doing. UTA passes to all the students in the school and all the staff in the school. I didn't get it out of committee, but I have some interest. And that will be a high priority for me next year, is a pilot program to allow charter schools and public schools on the Wasatch Front to sign up to do a pilot program like Salt Lake City's been doing. Clean air. I call my wife my canary in the coal mine. Has asthma. You and I see bad air. Some of you with asthma here will go outside. My wife says it's like having a 5-pound weight on your chest trying to breathe. When we get California air quality from burning fires and stuff, my wife is inside the house, sometimes running it at 95 pounds, shutting all the doors except to 1 or 2 rooms and turning on the air purifiers. We are not going to get a handle if we continue to build out the west side and build out Utah County and Weber County and Davis County by building the way we built the last 50 years and not prioritizing transit. We are not going to get a handle on air quality. We've got to change our transportation structure. 3 years ago, I was approached by Utah Clean Energy and said, Representative Briscoe, would you like to work on a green bank in Utah? I go, yeah. Just based on what it sounds like, I think that'd be great. I would love to do it. So for 3 years, we tried to get a green bank in Utah. The Inflation Reduction Act, $27 billion to promote reduction of greenhouse gases. We decided 14 months ago, after 2.5 years of trying, we could not get it past the legislature. So we did what Colorado did, and we went out and formed a 501c3. 2 years ago, Governor Paulus asked the legislature in Colorado to give him $30 million. That's not going to happen for a while here, but I am very excited to announce to you that I did work on a project. I was not the principal by any means, but President Biden announced on Monday that there are 60 grants. One of them is coming to Utah, $62 million coming to Utah for solar for all, which by our estimate, around 9,000 to 10,000 people, most of them, at least 40% of them, low income, will be receiving solar. And that money is coming to Utah, and I helped work on that project. And the other piece we worked on is going to take a little bit longer. Homelessness, what else do I like to talk about? We also fight off, I help fight off an attack on ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting now only applies to municipal campaigns where there's no party. So when you run for mayor, people may know you're Republican or Democrat, but you don't put a party on the ballot. They're kind of skittish about applying that to political parties right now. they tried to kill the pilot. I helped them get a speaker online that helped them turn the tide over in the Senate. If you know people who are 17, who will be 18 by November 5th, I got legislation passed that said that they can vote in the primary election in June. They have to be pre-registered to vote. They can go online and say, when I get 18, they're put in a separate category, so politicians can't grab them and get those names. But I think all the research I've seen shows that the younger you start participating in politics, the more likely you are. So I'm really happy you're here and you care about all this and that these people care about all this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I like being mobile, so I'm gonna grab this. My name is Grant, I'm Jed Miller, running for House District 24. I'm a public defender. I became a public defender because I wanted to help people in vulnerable situations. That's why I'm running for the Utah State Legislature. I come from a really peculiar background. My dad's from Wisconsin. My mom is over here. She's from the West Bank and Palestine. When she was born in Bethlehem. And then she grew up in Jerusalem. When she was 12 years old, her childhood home got raided by an Israeli military unit. My grandfather was detained for several years without due process or trial. When he was ultimately released, my family was exiled to Jordan. My mother ultimately came to the United States, met my father in Wisconsin. I was born, and then together they moved here to Salt Lake City when I was 1 year old, over to Bryan Avenue, a little bungalow that's just a few blocks away from here by the Macy's. My mother's circumstance taught me a lot growing up. She taught me about the importance of helping people, about service, about having compassion, and that true compassion requires courage. My grandfather, before he passed, told the family that if you want to see change in the system, you can't just sit around and talk about changing the system. You have to get in the system and be that change. And in many ways, that's why I'm standing here in front of you today. There's a lot of things that I think are very problematic in our current political discourse. I'm personally an attorney. I'm closely following all these things that are working through the United States Supreme Court and the Utah Supreme Court. They're very, very, very relevant to what impacts us here locally. Yesterday, what I found very disconcerting, the Idaho abortion ban is being litigated up in the United States Supreme Court. Yesterday, before the United States Supreme Court, they were literally arguing about how many organs it is acceptable for a woman to lose before a federal protection of abortion care can be implemented. And what's scary to me is that Idaho trigger ban is identical to what they passed here in Utah. Now, the Utah Supreme Court has pushed pause on that, but they've been sitting on it for a little over a year now. And I know the Supreme Court's not going to sit on it forever. I think any day now, we're going to have sudden news that reproductive health care is going to be inaccessible in the state of Utah. And not only is it not going to be accessible, there are criminal provisions that will prosecute gynecological obstetricians with felonies up to 15-year prison sentences. And these are charging decisions that aren't going to be made by medical boards. They're going to be made by the Attorney General, who's going to be a Republican, and it's going to be politically motivated. I've been practicing criminal law for about 7 years. I've dealt with cases where the Attorney General inserts themselves in politically related cases. It has a bad flavor. It's not dedicated towards the interest of justice. It's weaponizing the criminal legal system as a political tool, as a way to advance a political objective. In Idaho, when they passed that law, they lost nearly a quarter of their gynecological obstetricians. And grace be to the people who remain, because once again, compassion takes courage. What also captures my attention, what I'm worried about, is the homeless situation. I don't want to gloss over it. As a public defender, the majority of my clients are indigent to the point that many of them don't have housing. Similarly, the United States Supreme Court just said in Grants Pass versus Oregon that you can go to jail by virtue of the fact that you are suffering in poverty, nothing else. That's not a compassionate approach, not at all. Most of my clients, they wind up in the system because we throw law enforcement at it because we don't know what else to do. We wind up moving bodies around. And I understand that law enforcement does have a spot in the system, but without health care, we can't have any expectation of things getting better without solving the root. In my practice, I try to get exit strategies, a place to land, a treatment center, mental health, substance abuse treatment center, when you exit incarceration, to begin a transition plan. And ever since I started doing that, I noticed that recidivism starts going down because people have structure, they have purpose. There's something for them to hang on to. But we have a problem. The substance abuse centers, they have anywhere between a 2 and 16-week wait list. The mental health facilities have an 18-month wait list. I have clients in jail right now for nonviolent offenses waiting for these beds. But there's some optimism. I participated in creative programs that are compassionate, that find people where they are. There's a program called Kayak Court. I participated in it. It's a fun program. We go out with social workers. They're in kayaks. They go out and reach out to people on the banks of the Jordan River, see if they want resources. Now, if you want resources, if you have a warrant, you can't get into resources. So I'll be in my kayak. They'll wave me over and I'll see if they're a client of mine. If they've got a warrant, they do have an active warrant. We actually have a judge in a canoe with a bailiff and a clerk, and we have court on the water. And it allows people to integrate into resources without having to introduce a law enforcement element. You get out in front of it. Now, I don't want to take all your time because we've had a lot of speeches today, and I know I'm the last one. But I do want to say that I think that we're at a bit of an inflection point right now in our political discourse. The legislative session that we just had was very, very problematic, very divisive. And I don't think that it was unique. I think that it's going to become a new standard. I think that we're going to be dealing with more and more aggressive conservative attacks. I think they're going to be weaponizing more and more policy and using the criminal system to do it. I think we have a decision. All of us are on this plane together, and I think we're flying into a bit of a storm. But you all get to choose your pilot. And I understand I'm the new guy. But I've also had many, many bouts of turbulence, grappling with the government in my 7 years practicing in courthouses around the state. I don't mind weathering the storm. And I do think there's reason to be optimistic. Our demographics are changing. And if we start making changes now, the policies we implement now are going to impact the next generation of Utahns. Just like any other storm that we have here in Utah, every Utah knows you don't get a blue bird powder day without a heavy winter storm. And in that sense, I want to be your pilot. My name is Grant Miller. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you today. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you all to join in one more round of applause for all of the candidates. So the next part of our forum, as I said before, we got together as community councils to decide on some questions that reflected what we were seeing in District 5. And again, for people who are new here to the room, District 5 is the area that goes between 1300 East or 1300 East all the way down to the freeway. I'll read that question now. As community councils, we are the point of civic engagement that is closest to the people. Salt Lake City District 5 represents a wide range of constituents from East Liberty Park at 1300 East to Ball Park at I-80. During the campaign, candidates are present and accountable to the public. However, we receive a tremendous amount of public concern from constituents who feel left out of important conversations regarding issues of growth, including but not limited to education, affordable housing, transit and parking, property and sales taxes, homelessness, etc. Once the election is over, how do you suggest people insert themselves into important conversations with you after the campaigning is finished, if and when you're elected to a state level position? So we're gonna go backwards this time, starting with Grant. We'll give you a couple seconds, right, minutes to, and then we'll ask you to come up. Is there an issue with the photography if they go out here in front?
I can position.
Okay.
I can step behind it, it's an issue.
Oh, no, we just wanted to double check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How long?
Solutions have been found.
All right, okay, now how long are we giving?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is a 2-minute answer.
Oh, then I do want to time myself.
Sorry,
Okay.
and Christina, one more point of clarification for folks passing in questions. Would you like folks to direct questions to all candidates up here or to specific candidates? Because we have sort of a mixture of things coming in, and maybe we should have been more specific in our guidance earlier.
So as Amy is saying, we were handing out pencils with paper at the door to write down questions. And we got some questions for specific candidates. We are going to ask that all of the candidates answer the questions. And the people over here to my left are going through to make sure that there's not a lot of repeated questions, et cetera, coming in both here in the room and also on the chat. So if you did ask a specific question to a specific candidate or a group of candidates, can you please raise your hand now?
Okay, so that was a lengthy question, but ultimately boils down to how can candidates be accessible? And certainly it's a community focused question. I've been on Liberty Wells Community Council Board since about 2020. And some of the most important discourse that happens in a community, the stuff that impacts you the most is that grassroots community engagement. A lot of times in my tenure with Liberty Wells Community Council, some of the biggest things that impact you, I mean, this is traffic, big high density buildings showing up in the neighborhood, parking. This is the kind of discourse that allows community individuals, community organizations to directly advocate and negotiate with the city. Most of these issues are decided on the municipal level. Now, I do think that there is a little bit of a gap between what's happening at the community council level and our representation at the state level. And I do think that needs to connect a little bit more. Myself, I have done everything I can to try to make myself as accessible as possible. And I think that one of the important things that we need to utilize, and this goes back to what I said earlier about being at an inflection point and moving into a new era, a new generation, is that we need to utilize social media. Follow me. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Well, TikTok's the wrong way, I guess. But in the meantime, you can follow me. I'm at Grant is the guy. Some of the most serious issues that I see at the community level, for example, school closures, I talked about in one of my reels. I like to bring focus to community issues and accessible bite-sized formats. I will continue to do that once in office to make sure that people are informed with what's happening on the ground.
That was a long list: education, affordable housing, transit, property, taxes, homelessness. That's a good list, and it's an important list. And what I hear most about are affordable housing and homelessness. That's what tends to filter through. I've been a community council chair of the Central Community Council. I love community council meetings. My wife and I got married, and we went to a community council meeting, and the people were giving the mayor crap about parking in their neighborhood. And I went, they don't do this where we were raised. We went to Salt Lake City because we wanted our children to go to school and see people that didn't look like them. But here the mayor has to come to meetings and has to listen to citizens. I like the city. This is great. I've had Java with Joel's, I've had several on Saturdays, I'm gonna continue to have those, elected, I will continue to have Java with Joel's, I put out during the legislature, a weekly newsletter, and try to put out a newsletter once a month, I'll continue to do that. My contact information is all over, and I had at least 2 meetings this week with constituents who wanted to talk, or sometimes they're not even constituents, but they want to talk about something that may or may not be happening in your district. And I try and make time for all those people, because some people can't, some people just need to tell you they don't like something. Some people have proposals that are serious, are gonna cost the city some money to implement. Some people just want a safer street and are tired of being afraid to cross the sidewalk. But I have 2 or 3 communication methods going out. I'm open to your suggestions for how to make those better. I will continue those, and my wife will tell you, you have to put a sign around me saying, warning, former district teacher, and we like to talk.
If I speak like this, can you hear me?
Please speak into the microphone.
Oh, for the.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, to keep it do this. So the area that covers from 13th East down to the freeway, that's a vast area in terms of not just different economic, but different types of just diversity and a lot of different types of people from all different type of careers too. The best way to be a representative to people who are across all spectrums is just be there, show up. Calling, texting, social media, all of that. I had the thought early on that when I do this, I really want to truly be a representative for everyone, regardless if you live in my district or not. I want to be accessible. I want to hold a regular meeting so people who come know where to find me. I own restaurants and bars. I'm in hospitality, and a lot of people, that's the easy way to find me. I'm down at my restaurant a lot of the time. But it matters to be able to hear from all different voices, from all different issues that they're facing. By taking on this responsibility, I'm not taking on a lightly thing. I take it very seriously, and I want to make sure that whenever I've gotten so many different endorsements, and I always say back to them, I hope to make you proud when I get up there. And that's just not people who are endorsing me. That's people who are my neighbors and outside. So you will be able to, once I get up there, you will be able to find me. You will have my phone number. You will have my email. I will be there to make sure I'm making you proud. Thank you.
Right. And of course, absolutely. It's imperative that we have a good communication strategy, making sure that people can talk to each other and to their representatives. I will definitely be out there, accessible. One thing I want to emphasize, though, is that online retweets and likes, boy, people just think that they've done their civic duty by hanging out on social media, doom scrolling for days on end. No, we need to have people show up. Of course, you can't force people with the fact that they're busy all the time. I will be where people are. You meet them where they are. That's frankly is kind of a canned answer because it's pretty obvious. It'll work out well with any of the expectations that we'd have for keeping people engaged. Now, on the other topics, just quickly regarding affordable housing and homelessness. My background, actually, I got my degree in urban planning from the University of Utah. I was set to be a bureaucrat and all that stuff, just kind of wandered away. But in my period of time working with civic organizations, I have come to the conclusion that zoning laws largely suck. Zoning laws were put in place to separate people from 8,000 square foot lots from 12,000 square foot lots so that cities could zone themselves into prosperity by getting rid of poor people. That's what essentially it is. So the legislature needs to take the first step on this one and say to the municipalities, you cannot have exclusionary zoning. You must allow things like duplexes, accessory dwellings. You must allow subdivisions of acre lots and reduce the size. Got to allow that kind of supply of housing. Regarding parking, yes, the legislature can take a step on this one. Create special service districts called parking districts. This is all explained by Professor Donald Shoup out of his book, High Cost of Free Parking. And then you have the revenue generated from that parking district will stay in that district. It won't go to City Hall. These are the kinds of things you just allow some basic market forces to that one. People will learn that they have to pay for their parking, and they will have to, my time right there, but then they will realize that, come on, allow more people, more creative ways to at least provide better housing.
Awesome. I love that question about accessibility. I will be the most accessible legislator that you have ever met. And a quote that I like to live by is, what you do shouts so much louder than what you say. I want to read a text that we sent out. Our campaign sent out a text last night to thousands of voters. And I want to tell you what I said. Hello, Jeff Howell here, candidate for House District 23. I will be the most accessible legislator that you have ever met. What matters to you? Call or text me on my personal cell phone number, 801-441-8363. And if I don't respond, then don't vote for me. VoteHowell.com. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm providing my cell phone number on our website, on our text. I have met with over 300 people since I announced my candidacy. I care deeply, not only about mass communication, but the individual connection. And I promise, as your legislator, I will continue to be accessible. And I would love to have your vote.
Thank you, candidates. Okay, so our next question is, Salt Lake City residents experience the largest impact and effects associated with helping Utahns experiencing homelessness. What do you see as the state's role in providing services and funding around issues affecting the growing population of unsheltered residents? What do you plan on doing to bridge the complex network of local and state level stakeholders to move the needle on the problems that we see related to homelessness in our communities?
You want me to go first? Who's small?
So now we're gonna go,
Want to go back?
we're gonna go this way. You go
Yeah.
first.
And then what? Then what direction?
I'll work on it.
Okay, once again, I think what you do shouts so much louder than what you say. I have been an engaged member of our community. I served on the board of directors of the In-Between. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the In-Between. It's a hospice center for the homeless. We have about 60 beds, and I have been in the trenches. I understand this issue. One of the things that I want to promote is the microsites, the 50 microsites in downtown Salt Lake. It was a pilot project this past year. I think that was a success. And I believe the state's role in homelessness is funding. And it needs to be a joint effort. It can't just be done by the city, the county, and the state. It needs to be a joint effort coming together to solve this issue. I think homelessness, the root cause of it, for a lot of it, is addiction, mental health, and cost of living. I think we need to address those issues first. So that would be my plan for the homelessness.
Followed by Joel, then Grant, and Howell.
Where was I? Come back to my point regarding the housing. Yes, I appreciate the fact that, yeah, I guess we could probably find some more money to spend on. No, allow more supply. Tell the NIMBYs, that's not in my backyard, tell those people to stick it in their ear. If you got a residential area, then allow the housing that's needed, including some higher density, put in fourplexes, something like that. Regarding these more immediate terms, yes, I'll be supportive of the logical programs to ensure that people can get the help that they need immediately. It is such a systemic issue. Not one program on its own is going to be able to solve the problem with the housing. One thing I do want to emphasize, and we'll probably contrast with Mr. Miller here, is that we do not want to let up on the enforcement for people's behavior in our public parks. I live right next door to Fairmont Park, literally. It is my neighbor. I do not want that park turning into a toilet, and we're one Supreme Court decision away allowing permanent camping there. That's not what our parks were for. but we do need to increase the supply of housing. Like I said, you cannot get further without it. You've got to make sure that the municipalities are no longer permitted to keep doing exclusionary zoning.
I, for one, am really proud that I live in a city that cares about helping our unsheltered friends. My experience with my father being homeless when he was a little boy, people do not cause all the bad things that happen to them. They are not poor and living on the street because they fell to work or because they're lazy or because they're shiftless. And in our society, it's not principally addiction that puts people on streets. It's not principally mental health that puts people on the streets. We don't pay people a living wage in this state. My daughter's paying me rent. She's got some mental health issues. She's got a full-time job. She's paying 30% of her income to me. She's gonna have to make a lot more money before she gets out on her own, but I don't want her homeless. The 50 microhomes are being extended to September 30. I spoke with two people today. I spoke with Andrew Johnson and I did some text messaging with Tricia Davis. I know that, and this is not public information, I know that Wayne Niederhauser's he's trying to find 20 to 40 acres. He thought he had 24 acres, it didn't work out. He wants a place big enough, instead of having 50 microhomes, they have hundreds of microhomes. He wants a place big enough that they can have microhomes, they can bring in the water, they can bring in the waste facilities, they can bring in food facilities, and we can treat these people with some respect. And I'll give Wayne Niederhauser this, we're not gonna put people in tents. You know, what you're seeing just east of the transit hub there on 6th West, that's his low level entry. That's Wayne's idea of low level. No one should live at less than anything less respectful of humanity than that. And I support that. Senator Plum and I are working on legislation this summer to put together a fund. I know the city's talked about it. I tried it on the floor of the House this year to say if you live around a homeless resource center and you have a property loss, you have some windows broken, you lose a door, you should have a fund that you could apply for. It's not necessarily your fault. It's not necessarily the homeless people that are doing that. The state is doing some things that I'm really excited about. Times doing some things I'm concerned about. We don't have time to do it in 2 minutes. We can talk later.
Well, I've been called out and I'm gonna respond. I am not advocating for parks to become makeshift homeless shelters. No. What I am advocating for is putting in the work. We need more than just resources. If we want to get serious about our unsheltered crisis, then we have to get serious about our unsheltered crisis. I live just a few blocks away from here. My wife Carly and I walk with my dog around Liberty Park every day. And I see the encampments. Now, I'm a public defender, and it's not uncommon that I actually know the people that are in the encampments. Sometimes recently had a client that came to me and I said, "Where's home for you?" He's like, "Well, I'm living in Liberty Park." And I said, "Well, that's not good. Let's find a home for you." And he was resistant to it. But he came in on a warrant and we said, "Well, let's get serious." I asked about what life looked like. As it turns out, he had a kid. And he had parents, lived in the southern part of the state, and his parents were taking care of his kid. He wanted to get back to life, but he was just so far lost in the fray that he lost motivation. And it took investment. It took investment with me, working with him, working with my social workers, working with a placement that would take him, healthcare-based treatment to transition. And after we got him out of custody into that process, then he was able to get a housing voucher and transition. Right now, he's stable and is consistent with his probation, no other violations apply. He's got a place to live and he's working. This is the kind of work that it takes if we want to get serious about the unsheltered situation. It's not about political platitudes. It's not about easy answers. It's about really hard work. And if the legislature wants to get serious about it, then they have to dig down. The governor earmarked some money and that money went away. I'll talk about it a little bit later. It didn't all go back to homelessness. I'll pick this up in a second. I don't have time.
So here's the thing. Homeless issue here, Salt Lake City has bear the brunt of homeless issues for years and years. It should not be just a Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County issue. It is a state issue. Davis County finally stepped up and opened up their own resource center. Was it just last year, Representative? Recently. We need more other counties, other cities around the state to step up as well. I served on the Geraldine King Resource Center, the women's shelter, since the day of its inception. My business, Sapa Sushi, was right across the street from where the resource center was. Instead of going and fighting and trying to get rid of it, it was done. We knew they were relocating there once they opened up broke up Rio Grande. I wanted to take an active step and join the board to try to work with and understand the problem a little bit more. Since then, we've been able to, at my company, Sapa Investment Group, we do weekly cleanups with the residents there. We do stipends for them. Myself, my employees, we all volunteer to go and clean up. The other thing is I served on the downtown safety council with the mayor, with Niederhauser, with Chris Brown, with Jenny Wilson. And I'm good friends with the mayor of South Salt Lake, Sherry Woods, and they had the men's shelter out there, the hardest population they had out there. From day one, they made sure to get funding. I'm talking real fast because he's telling me 1 minute. From day one, they got funding to have police officers, full-time 5 police officers stationed in the men's shelter. I lobbied hard to make sure that every single resource center got their own in-house police units in each resource center. And what that did was it created community. It created a culture where the law enforcement knew the residents and they showed mutual respect and kept the order within the resource center there. That is effectiveness. There's a lot more things we can do. And I'm out of time now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. We have one more question from the group. As the capital of Utah and part of the urban hub carrying the highest population in the state, Salt Lake City also tends to be on the opposite end of the political spectrum from the rest of the more rural state. This can result in an us versus them mentality. As elected official representing District 5 voters, how do you envision raising the voice of your constituents and collaborating to get things done? Okay, so we're going to start with you, then we'll go to Joel, and then we're going to go to the academic.
One of the reasons why I'm running is because I am sick and tired of the gridlock, the contention, and the extremism on Capitol Hill. A vote for Jeff Howell is a vote for integrity, for decency, and effective leadership. And a very specific example, one of my best friends, his name is Representative Tyler Clancy. He and I served on the board of directors together at the Utah Emerging Leaders Initiative. He's 28 years old, a police officer, and he lives in Provo. He and I believe, represent a new generation who want to put aside party labels. We want to go solve problems and deliver results. I will work in a bipartisan manner to reach my hand across the aisle to do just that. That is my mode of operation, and that's my leadership style. So I would love to have your vote, and that's how I want to operate and how I believe we can create more change dealing with the supermajority of Republicans, is to start building relationships and to reach our hand across the aisle to get things done.
So do we get a cure cancer too? Was it the Apostle Paul who talked about how dangerous words can be? I have never seen anyone who wanted to solve a problem. I've never seen language get in the way of people solving problems who want to solve problems. If you don't want to solve problems, words can be incredible instruments of attack. Not everyone in the legislature is interested in solving problems. They're not all interested in solving problems. They're not interested in collaborating. They don't necessarily have an incentive to collaborate. I like those people up there. I consider many of them friends. Our views of the world are 180 degrees polar opposites. I stood up and said, we need to help the people who live around homeless shelters because this is a state problem. And I was told it's a city problem and Salt Lake City should fix it itself. I was told by people who were in the Republican caucus that they made disparaging remarks about our mayor that I wouldn't even repeat in public to you. When I was a school teacher, I worked very hard to make sure my classroom was a safe space for everyone who was in my classroom. Utah should be a safe space for everyone who lives in Utah. It is not. I have a transgender granddaughter. I don't want her living in Utah. I want her staying in New York where she's safe, or she'll be less safe living here. I try. I will continue to try. I will continue. You have to watch your language. Tim Schreiber is working with a woman who used to work for Governor Herbert, and he says it best. Learning how to talk to people respectfully doesn't mean giving up your passions of your values in one iota. It doesn't mean you give up on what you believe to be true and to be the most important thing in your life. And you have to learn how to talk to people about it. And I give you that commitment from me.
Huh? Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to make this so difficult, guys. Okay, so the question was, how are you gonna be effective I heard was as a Democrat when Republicans have the supermajority? I am not under any delusion that I'm gonna go up there and change the world as a Democrat, as a superminority. Until we can break that supermajority, and I think we're close. I think we're within 10 years of turning the state purple. Until we can break it, we have to work with them across the aisle. The Parley's pit, the gravel pit up there. Do you guys familiar with it? There was a senator, a rural senator, who was trying to pass legislation to make it so that they were taking away local and municipal authority on overseeing those gravel pits and those mines. It happened to be Senator Dave Hinkins out in Sanpete County. I own businesses in Sanpete County and Carbon County. I have a medical facility that does some grow operations out there. And so I've been working out in rural Utah for over 5 years now. I know a lot of the players out in rural Utah. I called Senator Hinkins up and I said, really? I live at the mouth of Parley's above Foothill, the closest neighborhood to that gravel pit. And if they were to take away the rule, the county mayor, Jenny Wilson, was going to have a hell of a time trying to oversee the environmental impact up there. All I had to say to Senator Hinkins was, really? You're going to take away the authority there? I live right there. My neighbors, we all live there. Our children live there. He backed off. He backed off the bill. He tabled it. We still have control of that district. I'm endorsed by a lot of unions, different unions up there. And one of the unions, AFL-CIO, had a conversation with me of, you're a Democrat who lives in Salt Lake, who has true ties to rural Utah? I said, yes. You're the only Democrat who has true economical ties to rural Utah, who's created jobs out in rural Utah. We have to use those leverage. We have to use those things until we can break that super majority. Thank you. Break the super majority.
I get the question a lot. Grant, you're a Democrat, you're going up to a place that's a Republican supermajority, are you out of your mind? And I say no. I'm not out of my mind. I am not up in the night. I know exactly what I'm doing. When you have a seat at the table, you have a seat at the table. You could use your voice. I know what it's like when the cards are stacked. I'm a public defender. I've been a public defender my entire legal career. All of my clients come through, they've been charged with something pretty terrible because I do major crimes and felonies, and they're usually dead to rights, and I have to deal with people I professionally disagree with, to a T. And they have all the power. I don't have any of the cards in that situation. I gotta navigate them and a judge. And somehow I have to find some way to get to a reasonable conclusion because the majority of our cases are gonna plead out. My client's not just gonna voluntarily plead guilty if there's not something that allows him or her some kind of clemency that is still acceptable to the judge, still acceptable to a victim, still acceptable to a prosecutor. How do you navigate that kind of situation when the cards are stacked? I'll tell you what, I've been doing it for 7 years. And every time I've been able to navigate that minefield, it's a specific skill set of how to deal with professional adversaries. And it's a skill set that I don't think we've ever had as Democrats up on the Capitol Hill. I don't think we've ever had a public defender up there. I don't think we've had that perspective. We have a lot of law enforcement-based perspective, and they're a public defender. It's got a unique skill set with dealing with professional adversaries. Now, I'm gonna quickly run out of time, but I also worked up on the Capitol Hill, got things done. Real briefly, HB 234 was a pro-trans bill that streamlined gender marker changes. I helped draft it, testified on it. We got it passed. So it's not a lost cause. You get things done. And I'm not up in the night. I know what I'm doing and why I want to go up there. We have to see it.
You're wanting to solve the problem between rural versus urban and the conflicts and problems with having a super minority and super majority. You're not going to solve it with the current two-party system. It's sclerotic right now. You're not going to get very far. You need to break it. Like I was, thank you very much, Representative Briscoe, for defending ranked choice voting. But my wagon is not hitched solely to that. Like I said, you get other forms of ballots. If anything, you want some other electoral reforms. How about the jumbo primaries, like what they have in California? That something to prevent the extremists who have taken over one party that doesn't even live in reality and another party that just kind of is barely there. You need the electoral reform to do this. You need to ensure that the extremists, they are exposed to the broader electorate, so that way they can be voted down. As it stands right now, when the decisions are made in the conventions or in the primaries, and the primaries happen to be closed, you're going to get more and more extremism. And I think this is imperative. It's basically the future of the concern about our republic. It's not gonna, if we ever do end up having a war, I don't want to say that we will. There's a current movie that's out there right now that's talking about this situation. I would like to know that we're at least trying to understand that these divisions are between rural versus urban. It's not going to be California versus Texas. There's areas in California that have some fervent Trump supporters, and there are areas in Texas that have proudly voted Democrat. You've got to break the two-party system to allow a broader range of voices and some more political parties to at least participating in that to bust up the extremism that we're heading towards.
All right, I need to ask for one more round for the candidates as we close out this. I want to take a second to give a round of applause to the audience members who sat through a very unique forum style that we set up tonight. We did this in order to get away from what our constituents were complaining about, where two candidates who are running against each other would basically play off of each other. And we would hear a lot about what the candidates historically had to say negatively about one another or what they were going to be doing different. So tonight we wanted to set up an opportunity for you to just actually hear what they would do if they were running by themselves. So thank you for putting up with us. The second round is actually, the questions will be asked by Amy Hawkins. She is the chair of the Ballpark Community Council. These are questions taken from the Zoom and also from the room that we've gone through and made sure that there's no repeats, things like this. During this part of our question, we will go in order by District 23 and 24.
Y'all look so good tonight. We actually got quite a few questions. There are a few redundancies, so we're going to collapse a few for your time and theirs. This first one is an amalgamation of 3 questions together. Hope that works for everybody. This is a familiar theme to everybody. What is your plan to create more housing in our state? Do you think that Utah's lack of tenants' rights adds to our affordable housing problems? And do you have plans to increase home ownership so that we have a stake in this city? Thanks. And order.
Oh, I just say we start with District 23. And let's put Cabot on the line third.
Is there time to go up there and just,
There's a 2 minutes again, that you can answer.
oh, they understand? Again, this is.
We need you to speak into the microphone for the people who are from home.
Yeah, careful with the mendacious words there, Kevin.
Yeah, how many times we've mentioned, but I'm honored to say it, is that, yeah, we need more supply of housing. And I do appreciate the concern about the tenants protection. Well, tell, who was Representative Colmore, he was sticking his ear about the constantly going, what do we have, 3 days notice in order to big people? Well, that's unconscionable. I'm not asking for rent control, I don't think that'd be a good idea, but yeah, at least show some compassion when it shows to the side of people that are facing eviction, you know, at least have some better tenant representation or something like that when they go to court. But again, it just boils down to what I've said before, like I said the third or fourth time. Change our zoning laws, allow more housing. If the city is good enough to say that it's a residential area, then allow more residences. It doesn't have to be McMansions. We can actually do something.
Yeah.
So the state passed a bill, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a $20,000 first-time home buyer tax credit for first-time home buyers. It sounded great. And then you learned that it was for brand new construction. How many people here, if you're a first-time home buyer, can afford to build a brand new construction here in Salt Lake City? That was a little gimme to their developer friends, right? We need real solutions here. Right now, we have a lot of developers who are interested in Salt Lake City. And so, you know, it is a kind of sometimes a local and municipal jurisdiction, but as a state, I think there's ways to partner with local municipal cities and towns to be able to make sure that when developers are coming in and if they have tax credit or tax breaks for their developments, it needs to be true AMI, average medium income, right? You need to look at the area that you're building and try to make sure that you're making it an affordable rent for people. One of the things that I am very passionate about in speaking with all these unions is rebuilding the middle class. We are losing our middle class, and that's why some of these problems that we're having with unaffordable and homelessness is people are not able to earn a livable wage right now. We kind of have to figure out where some of the solution is for housing and make sure there's housing. But the other thing is making sure that there's teachers and firefighters and policemen who can stay in the area that they serve. That's a huge problem right now. And that's why we're working with the state to come up with more incentives to keep those working men and women in the communities that they serve.
Affordable housing is a big issue. When I first announced that I wanted to run for office, I wanted to get a good understanding of what the sentiments and opinions and issues that the district cared most about. And we sent out a poll, and housing affordability was listed as number 3. So this is an issue that I want to tackle. I would, if I were elected, I would love to advocate for the Utah First Homes initiative that was sent out by the state, that they want to build 35,000 homes by 2028. So I think we need to incentivize developers to build more affordable housing in our area. I have many friends who want to come live in House District 23, but it's not affordable. So I think creating a path to ownership, starting at rents and then at leading to ownership, I think is the pathway that we need to move towards. So those are some of my thoughts on the affordable housing crisis that we're facing.
All right.
Affordable housing isn't just one question. Quite frankly, it's a multifaceted question because you have transitional housing for homelessness, and then you have affordable rents and market rate for renters, and then you also have the issue of buying houses and home ownership. And I think that, quite frankly, if I had 3 hours, I could really dive into the policy considerations of each 3 things. I don't. I've got about 2 minutes, so I will say this. In broad strokes, I think that we are in the middle of a crisis that we've seen for a while. The pendulum has swung to really favor people in power, landlords, developers, to the point that the individual has been forgotten in the mess. Mr. Nelson, right? You brought up 3-day pay or vacate being unconscionable. I had a 3-day pay or vacate. My first year out as a lawyer, I lived in one of those like corporate giant cubes over on North Temple. And it was a Friday morning. I was going to work and I closed the door behind me and there's a 3-day pay or vacate, an eviction notice on my door. Now, it was a mistake. I had a direct deposit set up. It was their website that malfunctioned that rejected everyone's direct deposit. But instead of being intelligent, they're a corporate unimind and they moved to evict everyone in the complex. And so I grabbed the 3-day pay or vacate. I canceled my plans today, went down to the office and they wouldn't talk to me. It took me the entire day to finally get this whole thing cleared up because it's a 3-day, not business day, regular day pay or vacate. I had to be out by Sunday. Something that was their problem. Those kinds of things, those kind of renter rights not only need to swing back to the pendulum, but need to be accessible to renters and first-time home buyers out of time. Sorry.
Yeah, but there's a point about zoning, that's not the only issue. Lack of tenant rights, absolutely. They also gain 3-day pay or vacate. I've helped people stay who've gotten 3-day pay or vacates. I've helped pay their rent. I've helped them stay in their apartments. 3-day pay or vacate, they can pull back and go, well, I didn't really need to start it now. They get to play with the time clock. They start it, then they stop it, then they start it again. And we need better rules. Representative Judkins, Representative Benyon have been working on this issue. And the Apartment Association and the home builders and others push back, and they push back hard. And if you haven't noticed, there are a lot of home builders in the legislature. Home ownership is going to increase when we finally build more affordable housing. I went up to visit my son in Portland and drove him home to the hospital where he works downtown. In Portland, they like to comment. We just do it, we just complain to our significant others. Someone had taken spray paint, painted on the concrete of a new building going up. Another unaffordable housing project brought to you residents of Portland. I'm going to put another issue on your table that you did not mention. Corporations building and buying homes en masse. Representative Benyon's working on this and is getting incredible pushback from homeowners. But normally in the past, it was a handful of people out there bidding, and now they're buying tens and hundreds of homes at a time. Enormous corporations, enormous venture capital firms. When it comes to building more housing, I've learned over the last 5 years on the Affordable Housing Commission, you have to want to build affordable housing. It doesn't happen. If you can build housing and you've got good credit rating, they'll give you money and you can build market rate housing. We do not provide appropriate tax credit support in Utah. We're starting to do a little bit. In Utah, unfortunately, my experience is that we can confuse being cheap with being frugal. I'm okay with being frugal and spending a dollar wisely. I'm not okay with being cheap and just not putting in money into the things that are going to help the people who need the help the most. And this is one area where we don't help the people who need the help the most.
All right, so another question, this comes from our folks online. Are you in favor of legalizing recreational cannabis in Utah? What do you see as the upsides versus downsides and potential unintended consequences? What about how to enforce regulations and restrictions?
Can I abstain? You want to go first? So for those out there who don't know, one of the companies I own is Dragonfly Wellness. It was the first medical cannabis company to the state of Utah. It is a medical program. We're virtually integrated, so we grow out in Sanpete County, Carbon County, we process in South Salt Lake, and we retail through our pharmacies in Salt Lake City and in Price, Utah. Price, Utah, why Price, Utah? Is in 2018, they had the highest opioid epidemic nationwide per capita. We wanted to put medical cannabis out there to make sure that there's an alternative. And we're working with the health department right now, and it's showing there's a downtick in opioid and meth use out there. It is a medical program. Our average patient's age is over 50. It is not for young folks who are using it recreationally. It is for people with true pain, true chronic pain, terminal diagnosis from MS to PTSD. We have so many that are benefiting off of this medical program. I, for one, believe that it needs to stay medical. And it needs to go through for people, for adults. If it's young children who are suffering from seizures, that is their choice between their parents and the medical provider. We are regulating it. Oh, thank you. Sorry. We are regulating it right now. And the regulators, the state legislature has a tight hold on it. It's hard to operate in this business. It is something that we as a family is doing because we believe that it does provide an opportunity for patients. I'm just going to leave it at that because that's just black and white for me with medical cannabis to have that option for patients.
Just a full disclosure, my first foray into politics was with the Libertarian Party. Yeah, we were basically hippies with guns and a lot of pot smoking there, but I am not in favor of full legalization. But she has a point about how I think our medical marijuana initiatives across the United States have been largely successful. I do not advocate, like I said, radical legalization, but I do believe that we can come up with some creative solutions. If the state of Utah has a monopoly on liquor sales, the liquor stores, and maybe they could expand into offering recreational pot and sold through the state dispensaries or something like that. These are different ideas. But the person who undoubtedly was asking this question probably has political proclivities, asking for probably more legalization. Yes, we should liberalize it, but not flat out with reckless abandon.
Yeah, I'll be short with my response. I think we're mostly aligned, but I would be advocate for medical cannabis. I've had friends who have had health issues, and medical cannabis was a source that they could go to provide relief, pain relief. So I would be in support for that. I'll do that.
You're the first one.
I don't remember it all down.
They're ducking the question. The question is, are you in favor of recreational marijuana? I don't have a problem with recreational marijuana. Okay. I don't have a problem with medical marijuana. I don't have a problem with recreational marijuana. It's not going to make anybody ever seen Reaper Madness. It's not going to lead. I don't think it will happen in Utah until it happens in Congress. If anyone's got a whole bunch of money and you want recreational marijuana and you want to go out and collect the signatures and get it on the ballot, come and talk to me first. I hope you have a friend who has very deep pockets, because the legislature, until it changes significantly, will fight that. That you can pass and they will try and kill. I had LDS officials ask me not to vote for recreational marijuana, medical, and I said, why not? And they go, well, the brethren are concerned that all these other states will do it. I said, like the 30 that are doing medical marijuana now, what are they afraid? They'll be 33, 35, 37, 40. All these people are doing medical marijuana because they just know someone is in pain or they're in pain and they want to alleviate someone's pain. I've read that some states have had some problems with recreational. I have not read deeply about it because frankly, legislators get the craziest crap in their inbox. People selling you marijuana grow lights. And I just unsubscribe for them because I go, I'm not going to be dealing with this. So I haven't paid attention. And if you want me to pay more attention, come and lobby me afterwards and maybe you'll convince me to run the bill. Thank you.
I'm jumping at the bit. Legalize cannabis now, seriously. There shouldn't be a question. There should not be a question. Here's the reality of it. Nevada's our neighbor, Colorado's our neighbor, Arizona's our neighbor. They all have legal recreational cannabis. Nevada last year raked in $1 billion in tax revenue. This is an economic argument. $1 billion. It's tethered to K-12 education. Now, how much did we spend last year in law enforcement efforts to incarcerate people for marijuana, which this state still does? $13 million a year is going to marijuana enforcement costs. As a public defender, I still defend people for simple possession of marijuana, and I will tell you they are not college kids. The ACLU did a study, county by county in the state of Utah a few years ago, figuring out how many times more likely a member of the Black community is for being arrested for marijuana possession against a member of the white community. In Salt Lake County, it is 5 times more likely. It only gets worse when you get out of here. Paiute County, if you're a member of the Black community, you are 37 times more likely to be arrested by law enforcement for cannabis than a white driver. Think about that. What does that say about our marijuana laws? It tells us a lot about systemic racism. Why do they still exist? If there's an economic incentive to help our kids and we don't do it, what does that tell us? This isn't about just kicking around and getting high. It's about class warfare. Legalize cannabis. Not tomorrow, not next year, now.
Okay, one more round of applause for the entire team here. You guys are doing great. We have one question that was submitted to us by educators. Salt Lake has identified I-80 in the tracks as the greatest barriers to equity in the city. Yet for 30+ years, Salt Lake City School District has bused students from the far west side to east side high schools. Do you believe anything can be done at the state level to alleviate the opportunity costs for west side students and families associated with this institutional barrier? If so, how do you propose to create educational equity for our Salt Lake City kids? Let's start with you guys. Okay, you're up again.
All right. We keep coming into these different barriers that are manufactured crises with our education system. For example, the Salt Lake City School Board moved to close down a whole bunch of elementary schools recently, very short-sighted. So we don't have enough kids, and so we're just going to close down some of these schools without seeing that, particularly my neighborhood here, Liberty Wells, is a professionally young neighborhood, and we're going to have a generational shift, and we're going to have a time when we need those schools. And wind up closing down a whole bunch of schools over on the west side that were food security locations. I mean, more than just schools that are used for education, they're cultural hubs. And so we have this issue with busing. We keep on bankrupting the public school system. We have people on the school boards that are actively anti-education. And each year the legislature is like, we need more money for vouchers. This isn't targeted towards the ordinary individual. The ordinary individual isn't saying, oh, I'm going to pick up 3 extra jobs so I can send my kid to a private school so that way I get an $8,000 voucher to subsidize that. No, that's ridiculous. What they're doing is they're trying to raid the public school system and siphon money out of that. And so we don't have the resources we need for education. And of course, once again, this is a class thing. Who are the people sending their kids to public schools that have the resources, lobby the legislature to try to siphon money out of that system? I think that when it comes to this, it revolves resistance. And we need to really address the way that our public coffers with education are being banked.
I don't know who asked the question. I'm happy to talk to the person who asked the question later. When they closed South High School, there were people who wanted to draw a line down I-50 or down State Street and have high schools on the east side of the city and high schools on the west side of the city. That also can be construed as class warfare. By saying we're gonna have a West Side High School and we're gonna have an East Side High School. The superintendent showed me a letter when I was in the school board from an East High School patron who said, why don't you just do why don't you build a high school on the West Side, and then they can become the prep school for the trades, and East High can go back to being what it was supposed to be, which is the school that prepares students for university. Now, that said, I have a friend who is Hispanic, who is pushing the building of Glendale High School. And they are not pushing that because they're pushing that to try and say, this is where we live. We don't need to be bused anywhere. We want our high school and we want it in our neighborhood and we'll run it. One of the reasons they divided the high school lines, east, west, and island, so they all went east-west, was to pull a cross-section of people across the city. There are institutional transportation barriers that we need to be more cognizant of. Their racist characteristics, their clean air characteristics, their environmental justice characteristics. It's a complicated issue. There's a lot of intersectionality here. I thank you for the question. Would like to follow up and do more with you with that. Thanks.
So I often asked on the campaign trail, what's your number one issue? And I emphatically respond with education. It is listed first on our website, and it's what I am most passionate about. If we want to create, if we want to remove barriers to opportunity, that's how communities flourish. And one specific piece of education that I care deeply about, that I think we could create more equality and equity, is getting every third grader to read at third grade, reading at grade level. That is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And regardless of where you live, I would advocate for more funds to empower our teachers, to empower our students to be able to learn to read and read to learn. So education is my number one issue that I care deeply about. And we were also endorsed by the Utah Education Association and the Salt Lake Education Association this week, which I think is very telling of the passion and support that we're getting from the community.
So I was one of those kids who grew up in Glendale and was bused up to East High every single day. Thank you. It wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy because my mom was working multiple jobs. I had to take the school bus, so I wasn't able to stay after school for all the extracurricular activities. I made friends who lived on the east side, and I wasn't able to go hang out with them because I didn't have a car. There are so many other real human factors to when you divide people and send them outside of the community they live in. I had a great education at East High. You know, I credit public education for how my family got out of poverty. I wrote an op-ed in the Tribune this past December around the school closures. There were 4 schools that were closed. And I am one who believes that when schools are at half capacity, they're not performing at the way they're meant to be performing. But the big onus of my op-ed was, it is now on the school district's responsibility to make sure that the kids who are being transported away from their immediate community to be welcomed and successfully integrated into these schools. We don't have a choice right now. This goes back to the affordability, where families are leaving Salt Lake City, young families are leaving because they can't afford to live here. It's a goose and egg whole thing right now. We need to make sure that if we have to make these decisions to close these schools, that we're finding ways to integrate so that the kids, like myself growing up, can have that healthy social mental balance as part of their upbringing, because it does matter. We know how much it matters now.
Thankful for Representative Briscoe pointing out that the situation regarding education, especially with the classes of separation of neighborhoods, is it's systemic. And it's a legacy, frankly, of bad zoning that happened over the past 78 years, which put people in ethnic enclave, separated the rich from the poor, et cetera, et cetera.
Redlining.
But, yeah, red line, there we go. She knows the terms. And, but here we are, here we are. I don't have an easy solution for this one. We talk about the busing, is this an issue about education? Could it be about transportation, civic design? It's all of it. I don't have a quick answer for that one. I'll give you a bit of a background. It's interesting. Yeah, a lot of us have experienced. She was bused from one side to the other. I grew up close to Granger High School, but Hunter had not been built yet. That tells you how old I am. And so I was bused to Skyline High School. I got to be among the more privileged kids and whatnot. These concerns about education run very deep. Yes, I'm very concerned. Imagine what better we could have, what much better we could be if we had, frankly, electoral reform. If we had more political parties who could step up and say, okay, we've got the good issue regarding education here, but we're not burdened with the baggage of something that you don't like with another political party. So you get more involvement. And I truly believe that would help our system. And just in closing, yes, I think Representative Briscoe pointed out that, and also Grant Miller talked about how yes, been cuts, but these cuts have been kind of nefarious. We started with the 5 and 7 income tax brackets. Oh, we were getting more and more money, and then bam, they flattened it down to 5%. Getting more and more money, bam, they flattened it down to 4 and some change. They're constantly doing that. They will not let education get better. Yet it's willing to grow. The money's there. They're just constantly, if they're not cutting it directly, they're cutting it from its ability to grow.
All right. Utah is consistently the last and the worst for the gender wage gap. It is a bummer. What could you do to help solve issues specifically impacting women in this state? Sorry, stakeholder. Not actually sorry.
Who you want to?
You want to get done? You pick out the.
I asked and I was told that Jeff had not gone first for a while, but I've been looking at questions, so I hope that's accurate. Jeff, would you like to go first?
I'm gonna take your picture now, so.
The gender wage gap is actually personal to me. So my wife is a full-time working mom. We have 3 kids. And at her organization, they did an audit and she was receiving 10% less pay than her male counterparts. So we both took action and we wanted to advocate for my wife. And after a couple of weeks, we went through a process and we were able to get her at the same level as her male counterparts. So this is an issue that I care deeply about, providing opportunities for those who aren't being paid the same to close that gap. So that's something that I would love to tackle if I'm up to be your next legislator. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that good question regarding gender pay equity. Again, I don't have a quick answer for it. I think probably if we had stronger unions, yeah, that would be helpful. Imagine also what we could do if we did have more political parties. We had electoral reform and encourages. Yes, I do admit I'm kind of a one-note samba right here. I'm constantly saying the same thing. Again, I don't have a quick answer for it. If there could be at least more transparency. The reason why I say more unions is because at least they would be able to negotiate and be able to expose some of the inequities that have happened regarding pay. I think it was abhorrent back when the Lilly Ledbetter Act they had was in response to a Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court says, well, you can't sue right now. You should have figured out that you were getting paid less than before. But you can't discuss salaries. I've had bosses 15 years ago told me, if we catch you guys discussing salaries, we'll be fired on the spot. Little I realized, I think there's federal protection against that practice. So what little I know. So there's a lot of information asymmetry that happens with pay. And Amy, I certainly respect you and that question on that one. If, like you say, you've got an issue with that, if you're a college professor or something like that, working with the university, and we probably need more transparency with what we have even in the private sector too.
Next between that.
It should be Hoang.
Oh,
Yeah.
Here's a wild notion. How about start with electing more women to have more fair and equal representation on the Hill? So we can start passing more policies to make more fair, equal wage policies here. Did you guys know that the majority of small business owners are predominantly women? Why do you think women are deciding to go out and start their own businesses rather than working for someone else or working in existing businesses? Because they don't have fair and equal opportunity for wages, for upward mobility, for all of that. We live in a very unique place where 90% of our businesses here in Utah are small business, are registered as small businesses. I think one of the things that we need to do to make sure that we start having more fair wages for women is we need to recognize and go support all these small businesses that are owned by women business owners. The thought that Cabot said about unions, that is a great way to start doing it. Unions right now, and I alluded to this earlier, they are working hard to rebuild the middle class. They are building a lot of their own internal apprenticeship programs, trade programs, and they are doing an incredible job of recruiting women, young ladies who are now coming into different trades that were not traditionally thought as a woman-friendly trade. So as a lawmaker, I would love, and I'm going to be working closely with these unions who have all come on board to endorse me, to put more policies in place to strengthen these apprenticeship programs, to get more women, more young ladies into these programs so that they can have a livable wage. I'm always someone who's a lot more pragmatic. I want to look at how do we start first to solve the problem. This is where we want to go to make sure there's fair and equal pay for women. We need to start by getting them trained to get to these programs so that they can make fair and equal wage against their male counterparts.
I'm just gonna stay there. I have some good notes on this one. Hold on. Quite frankly, the women's rights issue, it's an intersectional issue. You can't just focus on one aspect of women's rights without focusing on the entire picture of what draws women back in our economic systems. You want to close the gender gap, then you need to focus on normalizing maternity leave, reasonable maternity leave, and then provide reasonable paternity leave too, so that way there's not some sort of gendered prejudice against someone hiring someone who's a woman for fear that they're going to be an economic disadvantage down the road. Childcare, make childcare affordable. My generation here in Salt Lake, the more people in Salt Lake have dogs than they have kids. Because you can't afford kids, and everyone factors that into their economic calculus. That has everything to do with the gender wage cap. You can't participate in our economic system if you have to worry about your kids. Normalize and fight for reproductive health care. Right now, reproductive health care is heavy on the chopping block. And we can't neglect this aspect of women's rights and then say, boo-hoo, the gender gap, we don't know what to do, maybe a little bit of regulation, I don't know, it's just the way it is. No, intersectionality. Let's focus on the entire picture and make progress into it. Fight for the entirety of women's rights.
My mind is still seared by listening to Representative Suzanne Harrison bring legislation to the Revenue and Taxation Committee and say the state should give up some taxes, give them as tax credits to companies that provide women childcare. And then listen to several male Republicans mansplain to her why she didn't have her facts right, because men are so smart that if they figured out that they needed to give that to women in order to hire them, they would have already done it. If they aren't doing it, it's their fault. So I heard years ago, not that long ago, Derek Miller, who was the president of the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, say, we did a study, this is an issue where this matters to us. We showed it to all these businesses in the Chamber of Commerce. We looked at these businesses that had actually shrunk the gap. We gave them some positive recognition. We looked at it 2 or 3 years later, and they slipped. The companies that we rewarded for doing a great job of shrinking the gap grew. So what this suggests to me is everyone be pretty nice and pay the women in your workforce more is not gonna work. We're gonna need transparency. We're gonna need to report wages. I agree with Cabot, unions will be helpful, but even the best union president in decades it's starting to happen. I think we need to be more intentional and we need to be more forceful as a state. My daughter-in-law is El Salvadoran. Her parents immigrated from El Salvador when they were teenagers. A year ago, she just left employment with the state of Oregon. She didn't care for working for the state. She's back for a nonprofit. She was working for a nonprofit. It was frustrating to her. They kept giving her pay raises because she kept taking on more and more work. She quit and they hired 3 people in her place. She said, Joel, you talk about the wage gap between men and women. Talk to me, let me tell you about the wage gap between Latina women and men. Because it's the biggest in the United States of America.
Fine.
It's sexism and it's racism.
All right, well, that is everything for the night. We just want another round of applause for all of us. I want to thank all of you for taking an evening and spending it with us and being involved in the process. So we hope you have a great night and thank you.